His name isn't just a name anymore, it's a warning. It's a specific type of financial crime, one that's actually in the Oxford English Dictionary. But way before all that, he was just a man with a dream. In this explainer, we're going to dive into the story of Charles Ponzi, the architect of one of the most infamous and honestly, most enduring scams in all of history.
Okay, just picture this. It's Boston, the year is 1920. Some guy comes up to you with an offer that sounds completely impossible. He says, "Give me your money and in just 45 days, I'll give it back to you with a 50% profit." I mean, come on, that just screams scam, right? And yet, thousands and thousands of people lined up to believe him. And here's the really wild part. This playbook, which is a century old, is still just as devastatingly effective today. From huge modern scandals like the Çiftlik Bank case in Turkey to countless others, the basic mechanics that Ponzi perfected are still tricking people all over the world. His lie, it turns out, was timeless.
So, how on earth did an immigrant with a criminal past and just a couple of bucks to his name convince an entire city to hand over their life savings for a promise that just defied all logic? Well, let's get into it.
Ponzi's early life pretty much reads like a how-to guide for becoming a con artist. He was born in Italy, and when his mom sent him money for university, he just blew it all on fancy clothes and expensive dinners. He showed up in America with literally $2.50 in his pocket. After years of bouncing between odd jobs, he ends up in Canada, where he finds his true calling working under a fraudulent banker. And yeah, his first taste of prison followed pretty quickly after that for check forgery. So this wasn't a guy who just stumbled into a life of crime. He was practically trained for it.
So, what was driving him? Pure, uncut ambition. He actually told his wife Rose that he wanted to make her a millionaire's wife. See, he didn't just want to be rich. He craved the status and the power that he thought came with it. It was this one single-minded goal that would fuel his incredible rise and his spectacular fall.
But to pull this off, Ponzi needed more than just desire. He needed a real method. And he found it during his time as an apprentice, so to speak, under a man named Louis Zerosi. Working at Zerosi's bogus bank in Canada wasn't just a job for him, it was his real education in the art of the con. So Zerosi's bank wasn't actually making any money through legitimate investments. No, it was a simple, kind of elegant fraud. He promised this unheard of 6% interest. That's triple the normal rate. And the secret? Well, he was just using the money from new investors to pay profits to the early ones. Ponzi saw this firsthand and realized that as long as fresh cash keeps pouring in, the illusion of success is basically perfect. All right, so after another stretch in prison and a few failed businesses, Ponzi was broke. Again. But then, a piece of mail arrives, and it sparks an idea. It was this seemingly legitimate business plan that would become the perfect cover story, the perfect bait for the real scheme he was cooking up. So inside this letter from Spain, Ponzi finds this little voucher, an international reply coupon. Basically, you could exchange it for postage stamps in another country. And in the economic chaos right after World War I, he spotted a loophole. A coupon you bought for cheap in a country with a weak currency could be cashed in for stamps worth a whole lot more in the US. Now this was the genius of his pitch. He wasn't selling some kind of magic trick. He was selling arbitrage. It sounded totally legal, it was easy to understand, and it was incredibly plausible. You buy low in one market, you sell high in another. That's the story he sold to his first investors, convincing them they were getting in on a foolproof international trade secret. But here's the thing, that whole coupon business, it was just a story. In reality, there was no way there were enough of those coupons in the entire world to generate the kind of profits he was promising. The real plan was the one he learned from Zerosi: use new money to pay old debts. It's shockingly simple, and it works, for a little while. So, with a really convincing story and a few early winners spreading the word, the money just started pouring in. I mean, it's the power of social proof, right? When you see your neighbors getting rich, you don't want to be the one left behind. What started as just a trickle turned into an absolute flood. And Ponzi's scheme just exploded into a phenomenon that swept across Boston. The growth was just insane. In only 4 months, investments skyrocketed from a few $1,000s to nearly $2.5 million. You had people, even local police officers, lining up down the street, totally desperate to get in on the action. At his peak, Ponzi was personally raking in about $30,000 a week. In today's money, that's $500,000 every single week. He was living the dream he'd promised his wife. A huge mansion, fancy cars, he was the toast of the town.
So much cash was flowing in that his staff couldn't even count it fast enough. They were stuffing it into desk drawers, into closets, and even into office trash cans. I mean, the man who arrived in America with just $2.50 was now, quite literally, throwing money in the trash.
But a house of cards, no matter how big and impressive it looks, is still just a house of cards. The scheme's success started attracting scrutiny, especially from the Boston Post. Journalists started asking the tough questions, and when they couldn't get straight answers, they started digging. This headline, this was the first gust of wind that would bring the whole thing crashing down.
An official audit was launched, and the numbers revealed the lie. Ponzi claimed he had around $15 million in assets, more than enough to pay everyone back. But the auditors? They found he had less than half of that. There was no secret arbitrage business holding him up. The only thing keeping it all together was new money, and the second that slowed down, the music was going to stop.
So, with his lies totally exposed and the public turn against him, the final chapter of Charles Ponzi's life began. But here's the thing. While the man himself would fade away, his scheme would become immortal. His downfall was just as fast as his rise. He was convicted of mail fraud, but after a few years, he gets out, only to flee to Florida to start another scam involving swampland. He tried to escape the country on a cargo ship, got caught, served more time, and was eventually deported back to Italy. The millionaire was a nobody all over again.
And here is the final brutal irony of it all. Charles Ponzi, the guy who handled millions and promised everyone infinite riches, died in a charity hospital in 1949. His total net worth at the end? Just $75.
But his legacy? Well, his legacy was secure. So much so that the Oxford English Dictionary officially named his brand of fraud right after him. He didn't just commit a crime, he created a whole category of crime. He achieved this really twisted form of immortality.
So what's the playbook we need to watch out for? It's an impossibly high, supposedly risk-free return. It's that pressure to get in quick before it's too late. And it's a strategy that's so secret or complex that they can't really explain it. Those were the red flags back in 1920, and they are the exact same red flags waving today. Ponzi's name became a warning, but a century later, the question is, are we listening?